In the shadows of World War II, there was a gentle young woman who loved music, yet became the spy that Nazi Germany feared. She carried no gun, only a radio transmitter, but each signal she sent had the power to change the course of the war. This is the story of Noor Inayat Khan, the woman who chose freedom even when the price was her own life. Noor Inayat Khan was born in 1914 in the icy winter of Moscow, yet her life was filled with the warmth of music, spirituality, and gentleness. Her father, Hazrat Inayat Khan, was a Sufi leader from India, a man who believed in absolute peace. Her mother, an American woman of European aristocratic descent, gave Noor a quiet refinement and a deep, tender compassion. From a young age, Noor lived in a world unlike that of any other child of her time. No war, no hatred, only the sound of her father's veena, philosophical stories, and a longing to love every living being. Her family settled in France, where Noor grew up among sunlit gardens and serene music lessons. She loved writing, and she adored crafting stories as gentle as her own spirit. Before World War II broke out, she had already published a children's book, a rare achievement for a shy young girl who walked so softly it seemed she feared disturbing the world around her. No one, not even Noor herself, could have imagined that beneath her fragile appearance lay a strength the world would one day remember. A girl raised on the philosophy of nonviolence, who would later become one of Britain's bravest spies during World War II. When war swept across Europe like a black storm, the peaceful life of Noor Inayat Khan was swept away with it. In 1940, when German forces flooded into France, her family was forced to leave their beloved home in Suresnes and flee to England. For a young woman raised in the non-violence philosophy of Sufism, war should have been the most distant and frightening thing. But in that darkest moment, something within Noor awakened, a choice greater than fear. She would not stand aside. France, the place where she had spent her serene childhood, was now being crushed under occupation. Innocent people were being ground down beneath the boots of fascism. Noor understood that if she remained silent, brutality would continue to spread like wild weeds. And so, with a gentle heart but a blazing will, she made the boldest decision of her life. She joined the SOE, the Special Operations Executive of Britain. The SOE was unlike any other unit. It was a place for those willing to sacrifice, willing to vanish without a trace for the freedom of others. They sabotaged, disrupted, infiltrated, transmitted, and operated right in the enemy's shadow. The idea that Noor, a delicate, shy young woman who once wrote children's books, could be a candidate surprised many officers. They thought she was too gentle, too fragile, too unsuited for espionage. But Noor carried something war could never measure: the resolve of a soul unafraid of darkness. Throughout the training, although her combat skills never stood out, Noor shone through her extraordinary memory, her speed in learning codes, and her mastery of radio operation. She became one of the best wireless operators in her class, something the SOE desperately needed for the French front. Finally, Noor was assigned an extremely dangerous mission: to become the first female wireless operator the SOE would drop into Paris. When Noor Inayat Khan secretly landed in a France suffocating under the darkness of Nazi rule, she still couldn't imagine the brutal journey waiting ahead. Just a few days after arriving in Paris, the entire agent network she was assigned to support had almost been wiped out. The Gestapo launched violent raids, hunting SOE members like bloodthirsty predators. The comrades whose names Noor barely had time to learn were captured, executed, or vanished without a trace. And then, in a moment of painful clarity, the harsh truth emerged. Noor had become the only radio operator still active in all of Paris. Alone, in an occupied city, surrounded by thousands of Gestapo operatives and countless informants hidden in every street. From that moment on, she was no longer an ordinary agent. She became the last line of communication between the dying French resistance and London, where every coded message she sent could save lives or shape the fate of an entire operation. Day after day, Noor moved relentlessly. She pushed through storms, crossed rooftops, slipped through cramped attic rooms, carrying her 13-kilogram wireless set in a suitcase on her back or under a thin coat. Each time she transmitted a signal, she had only a few minutes before the Gestapo could track her position. So Noor constantly changed locations: rooftops, temporary rented rooms, even damp basements without a sliver of light. Tense, isolated, exhausted. But Noor never surrendered. When her superiors in London ordered her to leave Paris because the danger was too great, she refused. She knew that if she left, the resistance would go blind, descend into chaos, and collapse entirely. It was in those solitary, perilous months that Noor's bravery burned brightest. Her comrades would later call her the last beacon. And the Gestapo described her with four cold but awe-filled words, impossible to capture. The night in Paris was drowned in fog. In a narrow alley where only the sound of shoes struck the wet stone ground, Noor had just finished a dangerous transmission. She didn't know that, at the dark corner of the street, someone she once trusted was quietly signaling the Gestapo. That betrayal, silent, cold, ruthless, was the beginning of the tragedy. The door burst open. Shouts, the clacking of gun bolts, hurried footsteps. Noor was pinned down and tied up. But in that chaotic moment, she fought back with a ferocity no one expected. A slender agent who battled like a trapped wild animal. She tried to escape. 3 times. 3 times she risked everything in bursts of desperate flight. 3 times she failed. And then she was taken to the Gestapo headquarters. What followed were days that felt like a nightmare without an end. A cramped interrogation room, a harsh yellow light burning directly into her face, cold air seeping from thick stone walls. The Gestapo officers took turns questioning her in growing rage. Codes, locations, comrades, the entire underground network. But their demands were met only with silence stretched tight as wire, and Noor's gaze, calm, unbroken, as if saying, "I am not afraid of you." They strapped her to a chair. They beat her, slapped her, threatened her, cursed her. But the more they tormented her, the more terrified they became, because this fragile young woman refused to break. One officer wrote in her file, "Extremely dangerous prisoner, will never cooperate." Noor was placed under Sonderhaft, absolute solitary confinement reserved for special prisoners. The cell was so small she could not stretch her legs. No window, no light, no human voice. They wanted to crush her spirit. But what they didn't know was this: Noor's spirit was stronger than any chain. In that suffocating darkness, she held on to one thing and one thing only: her vow never to betray her comrades. At dawn in the Dachau death camp, a thin veil of mist clung to the cold gray walls, as if even the air itself knew that a tragedy was about to unfold. Noor Inayat Khan, her face gaunt, her body bruised after months of torture, was dragged out of her isolated cell. Yet her eyes still shone. There was no fear in them anymore, only the strange serenity of someone who had chosen an ideal greater than her own life. The Gestapo tied her hands and pushed her across the yard. Every step Noor took echoed like a slow drumbeat of fate. No trial, no verdict, only the merciless silence of the Nazi war machine. In front of the firing squad, the officer ordered her to kneel. Noor refused. She stood upright, even though her body was on the verge of collapsing. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. A young woman who once wrote children's stories, who once believed in absolute nonviolence, now faced death with a strength that stunned even the German soldiers. And then, at the very last moment, Noor screamed, a scream that tore through the mist and clawed at the gray sky. Liberté, freedom. The gunshots fired. Her body fell, but her spirit did not. After the war, when the truth of Noor's death came to light, Britain and France did not simply mourn, they revered her. She was posthumously awarded the George Croix and the Croix de Guerre, becoming a symbol of pure, unwavering courage. Noor left this world, but her cry of freedom still echoes to this day. Noor Inayat Khan left this world when she was still so young, yet the light she carried has never faded. In the midst of a brutal war, a woman raised in the philosophy of nonviolence chose to stand on the side of freedom and was willing to sacrifice everything to protect what was right. Noor's story is not just another chapter of wartime history. It is a reminder that courage can rise from the gentlest souls and that freedom is always built upon the quiet sacrifices of ordinary yet extraordinary human beings. If this story touched you, please help us keep it alive.